This is about actually how we think the best way to pay is. We obviously will take feedback on this. All that, we got to remember, all this stuff, anytime we change the manual, we change the rules, we change the policies, or we change the standards, all that will go through the promulgation process. It'll be presented to the Public Health Committee. It'll be presented at Rules and Regs. There'll be a comment period. So when we write down something and think we're ready, that's it. There's always another chance for comment and a chance to change, and a lot of times we do. The provider would bill once a month, and if the episode payment was $12,000, you'd get a reimbursement for $1,000. If there's more than one provider, I think before we've shown some slides that show something like 20% of the people either have one provider for waiver, one for DDTCS, or one for waiver, one for case management. We could break that. I mean, that would be broken out. And the amount for DDTCS would be sent to the DDTCS provider. The remainder to be sent, still be sent in 1/12 bundles. We had a question about, well, what about small providers who have people who are using a big chunk of their budget level, budget tier, budget payment? I can't get it out. I sure wish Shelley would go get me a Diet Coke. What if there's a $5,000 equipment purchase in there or a home modification? And that throws some cash flow off for some of our smaller providers. Also, what if somebody has a $10,000 bundle and they use up $7,000 on that kind of stuff in the first 3 months, and then they switch providers? If you look at the graph on the right, this is a young person's graph. I don't understand it, but the young folks that made it do. I think the message it's trying to show is there was only 53 people who had any big bulk one-time purchases of over $4,000, of less than $4,000. No, more than $4,000, less than $4,000. Something on one side or the other. Less than? Where's Stephanie or Craig? All right. I got it. And then there's only 23 that had even bigger than that. So it's not a lot of people. We got 4,200 people on the waiver. We're not talking about a huge number of people. We're not going to redo the whole system for these people. But we are going to make sure we have an exception so nobody gets punished. If you got a $12,000 plan, in your plan of care, that meeting says I need $7,000 worth of home remodeling, whenever that occurred, that part would be carved out and paid. Now the other $5,000 would be divided by 12 and paid out in monthly installments. But that way, if somebody moved, nobody's punished. If somebody moved providers, or there's not a cash flow issue for the provider, and the person who needed the service doesn't have to wait for that much money to accrue. Now, with the last bullet point there, we know that we've got some folks, not just little folks, big folks too, that might have cash flow issues. And if that's the case, we think we can make the payments more timely, not timely, more often, if that's what's best for everybody involved.
First of all, I do appreciate the fact that you are slowing down this process. I know that was one of the things that providers and stakeholders were concerned about in the beginning. But I think, though, at least where I am, there's typically more unknowns when I leave these meetings than the known answers, and it sounds like there are still several unknowns out there. But first of all, following up on Ms. Sherma's comments and concerns, I'm also concerned that maybe you're having meetings and stakeholders are giving inputs, but I'm not sure the inputs are being responded to. And I would like to know the makeup of the Development and Implementation Council, who those 17 people are, who they represent, and how they were chosen.
CFCO Council, Anna we'll make sure we get you that. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. I know there were some pretty
Perhaps
firm
you can send
guidelines.
it to everyone on the list. I know
Sure,
we-
that's a good idea. And I think we could post it on the website too. I thought about the people leaving here with unknowns, because I get that a lot too. And I really think that's part of the process. Until we get to the part where we're ready to make rules, we're going to have unknowns. We are unique in that we are changing an entire population's service system. And we're not looking at an acute episode, tonsillectomy, upper respiratory. We're looking at a lifetime episode. There's a lot of changes. We've also chosen to have a lot of stakeholder engagement, and that is time consuming. It raises a lot more questions than it does answers. I heard John say one time that, when you start talking about heart disease, you get the 3 most prominent heart doctors that you can find in a room, and you hammer it out. But when we're talking about taking care of people with such a wide variety of needs, it takes a lot of input. Now, there is a difference between us hearing input and trying to act off a consensus. I know I hear that quite a bit too, but that you're not hearing what I'm saying. Well, sometimes we do hear, and we just can't do what you want us to do. But what we try to do is what's in the best interest for the most folks. And we offer every time to meet with anybody that wants to come up there. The DD providers come up and ask to meet with us probably once every 2 or 3 weeks. We have other advocacy groups that participate. We'll meet with whoever wants to meet. We've met with therapists. I've met with HTC parents before. That's the way we get input. That's the way we exchange information. I'll be glad when we can have a lot more knowns than unknowns, but I know we wouldn't be doing this process right if we rush to that judgment.
I know that the assessment tool was great concern early on. Is that still a great concern with providers, or are they more satisfied with that tool?
Well, I'm not hearing the number of complaints. I think everybody's moved on and realized that that's what we're going to do. Okay. Everybody was concerned at the beginning.
Okay, but when you say that, though, it doesn't sound like their concerns were so much addressed as they were told this is what's going to happen, so we've got to move on. Is that correct?
We looked at 3 tools. We ended up getting to pick one, and I don't think anybody who participated in the process of looking at the 3 tools was excited about the fact that we got our scope narrowed. But I don't want. I'm sitting here looking at a bunch of providers. I want to answer for them. I think we've moved forward. I think that Shelley's done a good job of addressing the concerns that were presented to her, and we like I said, it really doesn't come up as nearly as often as it did at the beginning. And now that we're doing them, I think we're going to have a chance to see how they work and get some feedback from the people that are doing the assessments and the people who are getting assessed. And we'll see if we've made a good choice. If not, we know we can always start back over.
And last question, because I'm sure other people have questions, but on page 10, on the left-hand column of goals, it talks about being influenced by competing stakeholder priorities. What do you mean by that?
There are times when there's more than one opinion in a plan meeting. If the person getting the service wants their bundled amount or their plan to include supported employment, and supported employment is more expensive than what the provider wants to spend, we want to have a way that can get resolved, and that we've set up the structure of the payment program to where we have as few of those kind of problems as we can. The complaints I get now are not many, but occasionally somebody who lives at one of our 10-bed ICFs and does not want to go to the day program. They say absolutely don't like it. They don't like congregate care. They don't like riding the van over there. But because of the way we've got the price structure set up, it's almost imperative for them to go over there for people to make their 10-bed break even. We've got to make sure we don't have those kind of unintended consequences in our system, and we have a way for people to be flexible.
A quick question about the number of levels, and we've talked about this before, but and I would vote for the biggest number of different levels that we could get because of the difference in level of need that people have within those categories. But the question I really have is, what would be, we talk about when we get all these assessments done, things will sort of fall out and we'll sort of know how many different categories there are. What's the problem? What would be the problem with just having more rather than fewer?
Let me take a run at it, and Shelley knows a little bit more about this than I do, so we'll let her actually provide the answer. But from what I understand, and my just general experience has been, it's better if you have a lot, because then you're more likely to hit where you're supposed to hit. The problem is then are you reassessing people more often than is necessary? The problem with having too few is it allows people to game the system. If you have a $10,000 spread, then somebody might say, well, the average cost for that tier is $30,000. We need to get, almost everybody that comes in here, we need to make sure they're between 25 and 30. Let's not take very many people that cost from 30 to 35. If the spread is $1,000 or $2,000, that's a lot harder to do.
Yes.
So, I don't know. Shelley, I always want to advocate for fewer because I think it'll be easier to keep up with.
If you think about folks among us who serve people that are difficult to serve, and if you have like 10 levels, as you've said before, Dr. Green, if somebody is just barely over level 9, that could be a huge difference between somebody who's at the top of level 10. And because we tend to serve people who have more significant disabilities, then we could really get slammed with a lot of people at the very top. And I see that being really hard to manage for a lot of providers in here who serve people that other folks don't want to serve. One other question.
I was fixing to agree with you.
Thank you. I know you were.
All right.
Thank you. The other question is about outliers.
That's what I was going to include in my agreement.
Well, go right ahead.
You brought up a good point. I get nervous about even 10. That sounds like a lot, but you got to remember our services range from $10,000 around to anywhere like $140,000 or $50,000. Well, that's a lot of room, and we're going to probably need a lot. Now, the hard part's going to be the outliers and the people on the ends of the scale, both ends. We've spent hours agonizing over the guys who right now get around $10,000 because we always end up wanting to have another assessment to divide them into more groups, to the $8,000 group and the $9,000 group, and we can about run ourselves in the ground worrying about very few people. But when we get up to the guys who cost $140 and really need it, we've got to make sure we make those decisions correctly. I know ASN serves a lot of those guys. We serve a lot of those guys at our HDCs. There's going to be people who really need more than whatever the cap we put on it. And we're going to have a way to deal with that. But I think we're better off looking at that individually rather than trying to solve it for everybody when we know a great clump of folks will cluster around the mean like they're supposed to.